Your Washington Nationals get two much-needed wins over the weekend against the San Diego Padres. And in better news, the offense did not stink. But in even better news, I think the Nationals have themselves a big game pitcher.
You are Locked On Nationals, your daily Washington Nationals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thank you for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Clary, and thank you to all the everydayers out there for returning. And if it's your first time, welcome, enjoy, and have a seat for all your Nationals content right here, right now on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every single day. And later on in the show, we're going to preview the Nationals over up in the Pacific Northwest as we take on the Seattle Mariners. We're going to preview that series in just a little bit here. But second off, it's a Monday. We have to get up on a national stock report. Who's been hot and who's been not. I'm going to tell you everything about that, as that is your way to figure out who has been the best and the worst Washington National over the last week or so. We're going to get into that, but let's start off with talking about this Padres series, as we know already about the ramifications of this series. There wasn't any playoff scenarios in this one, but you look at a Juan Soto trade from last year and Mackenzie Gore and CJ Abrams already being on the Washington Nationals roster. That's what the eyes were on, and all three of those guys showed out this week. And in particular, let's start with Mackenzie Gore. I talked about Mackenzie Gore and how I truly believe that he is going to be a big game pitcher. Now, you may ask, well, what does that even mean? What does that even mean for this team? Is that a good thing? Or is it just kind of like a, cool, he pitches in big games, we like that? No, I think Mackenzie Gore is the big game pitcher on this Nationals team. And further, what does that mean? I think Mackenzie Gore is the ace of the staff. And we saw that in yesterday's performance as he shoved on his former team, going 5 innings pitch, giving up 5 hits, 9 strikeouts in those 5 innings, and setting a franchise record of his first 6 batters faced. He struck out all 6 of those guys. Mackenzie Gore is that guy. He is that one that you have inked in red pen when you're facing against him. And that red pen's not a good thing for opposing teams. It is a bad thing. You do not want to run into Mackenzie Gore when he is on. And yesterday, even you can even make the case it wasn't even one of his best performances. And I say that because still, we know what his main issue has been. It has been his command. Now, while he didn't only really walk that many batters yesterday, only walked 2 batters in yesterday's game, still, his balls to strike ratio still isn't where it needs to be. 104 pitches through those 9 innings is not, or through those 5 innings rather, is nothing to be shamefully pride about. You really shouldn't be, because Mackenzie Gore, once he starts working on his command and once he figures that all out, that's when you'll see the best version of him. And I think we saw one of the better Mackenzie Gore starts just yesterday. And most importantly, in my opinion, this tells me a lot about someone. I tried to do the research for this, but couldn't really find any answers. Juan Soto struck out to Mackenzie Gore not once, not twice, but 3 times in yesterday's game. We know Juan Soto. His strikeout to walk ratio is one of the better of all time compared to Barry Bonds and all the rest of them. Mark McGwire, all those guys. Juan Soto is in that conversation as one of the toughest hitters to strike out in all of baseball. I'm trying to think of times where we had Juan Soto for the Nationals striking out 3 times to 1 pitcher. I would think maybe Max Fried might be in that conversation, but now certainly Mackenzie Gore is. Mackenzie Gore and what he did just to Juan Soto alone, and also that little stare down after the 3rd at-bat, getting Juan Soto on a full count. How awesome was that? Mackenzie Gore is that big game pitcher. And I think that's what he established himself as yesterday. Because going up against San Diego, a sold-out crowd, 40,000 people there, however many people are there, Mackenzie Gore showed out. And that was a game that he had circled on his calendar for months, going back to San Diego, showing him what he was worth. And that was a top 5 pick back in the 2017 MLB draft. He showed everything that he was worth for the Washington Nationals just yesterday. But it wasn't just Mackenzie Gore. It simply was not that. You also have performances from guys like, Jamar Candelario, per usual now, adding 3 hits and 3 RBIs and 3 runs scored. Jamar Candelario now has an OPS over 800, sitting at 809 heading into the Seattle series. Jamar Candelario is putting himself into a territory of not only is he going to be traded at this deadline, but he's going to have some run, meaning he's going to have some teams really interested in him and what he does at the plate. And for a switch hitting third baseman that can hit for power, that can get on base, and can do all the things efficiently that you need him to do, that is a huge deal, because last year in 2022, one of his kryptonites with the Tigers last year was his defense. Now we look at his defense, and obviously he did have an error yesterday in that ball game. But if you really look at it, it was a tough ground ball to field from Nelson Cruz. It was like a one-hopper with wicked backspin on it. There's nothing you could really do about that. Jamar Candelario has been awesome defensively this year, and I think we saw just a little bit of a slip-up in yesterday's game. But also, I don't really think that's an error. I think that should have been a hit to Nelson Cruz. So maybe the MLB scores change that eventually, but I don't think that's an error. That was a tough play, and it just ate up Jamar Candelario. But beside that point, these guys and these Nationals hitters who have been battling for a while now. For instance, Lane Thomas right now, I talk about slugging a lot on this show. It means a lot to me when I evaluate hitters. It means a lot in today's baseball, because today's game is ruled by the extra base hits and the home runs. So I look at slugging percentage, which really justifies all those different things. Right now, Lane Thomas, pointing him out single-handedly, has a higher slugging percentage than Juan Soto. Juan Soto, the power bat, the hefty lefty, whatever you want to call him, the GOAT-O. Lane Thomas has a higher slugging percentage heading into this Seattle series than Juan Soto does after that 3-game series. Lane Thomas added a hit and an RBI, obviously, yesterday, and his OPS is now up to an 847. An 847 OPS. And he's also got a 295 batting average. So I've talked a lot about a Lane Thomas potential trade at this deadline. This is going to be something we're going to get into a little bit later on in this week, because I believe Lane Thomas right now, as we sit here on June 26th, I think there's a much better case that Lane Thomas is a building block for these Washington Nationals than a trade piece at the deadline. Just from the way that he has been hitting in his defense, what can't this guy do at this point? Because in yesterday's contest, while we talk a lot about Lane Thomas on the show, what can he do? It's starting to get incredible, in my opinion, because I didn't really expect this type of turnaround for Lane Thomas. While he was our most valuable player last year, what did that really mean in a team that lost the most games in all of baseball last season? Lane Thomas was good, but he was not great, because right now he is great. And right now, there is no chance in hell he misses the All-Star game, just from the way that he's been hitting. And yes, an All-Star game doesn't mean the end of the world. It's not anything that you really haze on a banner nowadays just because of the fan votes and everything. It's a popularity contest. We all know that. But by performance, Lane Thomas is absolutely an all-star. Just from his runs created plus, all these different analytics and his defense in particular is what has made him stick out so far this season. And that is an important factor in this Nationals rebuild. You're going to have guys who may not have all the talent in the world, who may not have a 60 grade power and a 60 grade hit tool. But you're going to have these kind of random guys step up in this rebuild and really catapult these Nationals into the next generation of postseason baseball here in DC. And that is an important factor considering that Lane Thomas, let me remind you, was traded for John Lester at the deadline. John bleepin' Lester. So that also goes into consideration for this deadline. Just kind of see what the track record of Mike Rizzo is. You trade away a bad pitcher, and you get now a potential all-star with Lane Thomas. That is why you're going to see seeing guys like Jamar Candelario, like Ildemaro Vargas, other guys like that be moved at this deadline. Because this is what Mike Rizzo does best. He generates trades, and when he does do that, he does them damn well. The Nationals play the Mariners tonight at 9:40 Eastern Time. You can catch that game and every pitch of the Nats' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Nationals there. And before we get into the National stock report to see who's been hot and who's been not, I got to tell you guys about our friends over at eBay Motors. And guys, for a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit. Or, of course, your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. And now we get into a national stock report, as this is the segment where we get you caught up to speed on individual performances, who's been hot and who's been not. So let's start with a stock up for shortstop, C.J. Abrams. And obviously, returning to San Diego this past weekend, we needed to see a nice little kickstart for the kid. So over his last over his last 7 games this past week, he's got a .414 batting average, a .462 on base percentage, and a .667 slugging. That's a 1129 OPS in that time frame. You've seen a big step up from C.J. Abrams over this last week, and I think this is more of the normal of what we should expect with C.J. Abrams moving forward. This guy is still one of the better prospects on this Nationals team. Now, while he isn't really a prospect anymore, he's unavailable. He's been in the majors now for about a solid year up to this point. You still look at him as that prospect type, being only 22 years old. He was 21 last year, getting the first crack in the major leagues. C.J. Abrams is still a work in progress. And you see these times where C.J. does get hot. And when he's hot, as these numbers have shown here. His slugging is way up. His on base is up. His batting average is up. And most importantly, he's also stealing a few bags here and there. He had 2 stolen bases and he had 4 runs as well. That is when you'll start to see this Nationals offense take a big step up. When C.J. Abrams gets on base and wreaks havoc on the base path, which he should be allowed to do a little bit more, I'd be really curious to see what's been holding him back on the base path. Is it Davey, someone in his ear being like, hey, let's let the bags come to you. Don't be stealing too much. Don't be too aggressive out there. I don't really know what that is, but C.J. Abrams at the plate and defensively has taken a big step up, and that is a much, much needed one for this Nationals team. Stock down, left-handed pitcher, Patrick Corbin. He had 4 earned runs in his last start, and then he had 7 earned runs on Friday night against this Padres team. And listen, it's bad handling after bad handling. You're going to get called out. You're going to get a stock down from myself from this. You can't be giving up 4 earned runs and then 7 earned runs in that next start, because the Nationals, while the offense wasn't really there on Friday night as well, Patrick Corbin certainly did not show up in the best way possible. And I thought that he could do something, considering you have guys like Juan Soto and other lefty bats in there that could make it a little bit of a tough matchup for the Padres. They took advantage of him. Ha-Sung Kim almost took 2 balls deep in that ball game on Friday. And it just wasn't a pretty outing for Patrick Corbin. He's not striking out guys. He's walking a few guys here and there, and it just hasn't been pretty. And that's kind of what we're starting to see right now with Patrick Corbin, as his ERA is now well inflated up into the 5s. Stock up. Talked about this guy a little bit in the first segment of today's program, and that is third baseman, switch hitting, Jamar Candelario. Jamar Candelario is 8 of his last 26 in his last few games or so. He's got 2 home runs in that span, 6 RBIs, and his slugging is up to a 654. I talked about what Jamar could be at this deadline, and what the Nationals are doing up to this point is they need to hope Jamar stays hot, because if this guy stays hot, he's going to have a high demand come this trade deadline. It's as simple as this. Teams need third baseman. You look at the Angels, while they did make a trade the other day, they still certainly could be in the third base market. Anthony Rendon on the IL. Gio Urshela could be out for the season. They need a third baseman, and they need one pretty quick. Jamar Candelario is going to be in that conversation for someone like the Los Angeles Angels. While they did make a corresponding move the other day to hopefully plug that gap, I think people will realize they need a little bit more. And this is a team that needs to win now. They have Shohei Ohtani on their roster, and they really need to win this season because he's a free agent. He could be joining the Mets, the Giants, the Cubs, whoever it may be. The Angels need to win now, and it's not just the Angels. There's other teams out there as well. Could it be, I don't know, the Yankees? Who could it be? Jamar Candelario will have an open market. I can guarantee you that. Cheap, 1-year deal rental. The Nationals will probably get a bullpen arm back in return, which we know we desperately need a bullpen arm to add, or even, how about 6 arms to add? Stock down. Bullpen pitcher, right-handed pitcher, number 1 overall pick in the Rule 5 MLB draft this past winter, Thaddeus Ward. He has been getting rocked around in his last 11 innings pitched. In his last 11 and a third innings pitched, he's got 11 earned runs, 7 walks, and 14 hits. Listen, this Thaddeus Ward experiment, I think he's still really good. I think he still has the upside because I believe in stuff. Why I was never really all that concerned with Josiah Gray over the last 2 years was because I saw this stuff. His stuff still plays, and it goes for the same with Thaddeus Ward. You're just not seeing the results. You're giving up a lot of walks. You're giving up a lot of hard hits. You're giving up home runs, and you're not putting batters away when they need to. But the thing is with Thaddeus Ward, 26 years old, the time is now. And you can't just send him down to the minor leagues. The Nationals would be forced to cut him, and then he joins back with the Boston Red Sox because that is the way that the Rule 5 MLB draft works, and it's not a fun one. Thaddeus Ward, I still believe, has the upside, but you cannot put this guy in any meaningful situation just because of what he is. He really should be down in AAA. This guy really should be down in the minors, continuing to develop and continuing to find his motion up in the big leagues. But it just simply can't work that way with how the Rule 5 draft works. So Thaddeus Ward, I don't know what to do with it, man. He just hasn't panned out yet. It hasn't worked for him, and he's got to stop walking all these guys because that is what's hindering him the most. Stock up for a bullpen arm that I didn't really expect to do too much this season, but he has been. Stock up for Jordan Weems. In his last 9 innings pitched, this guy's only given up 2 hits, 1 earned run. He's only walked 2 batters, and he struck out 8 as well. Jordan Weems has been a pleasant surprise since being called back up around mid-May. Jordan Weems is someone who you're going to start seeing get a little bit more pitching time in close games, as we've seen Hunter Harvey kind of giving up over the last few weeks or so and not really being his usual self. You've seen step-ups from Mason Thompson outside of his performance yesterday, walking 3 batters. Jordan Weems has kind of been that staple in the bullpen over the last few weeks or so, pitching really, really well for this Nationals team. And when he does, he comes in and he eats innings. He gets out. He gets in and out relatively quickly. And that is an important one when talking about this Nationals bullpen because we don't really have too much guys that you can just rely on and depend on and really hang your hat on for the Nationals and the rest of this bullpen. We know it's been a mess. You don't need to tell us that. The Nationals bullpen has been an absolute mess so far in 2023. but there are individual, relatively pretty solid performances from guys like Jordan Weems, from guys like Carl Edwards Jr. at times, Kyle Finnegan, Mason Thompson, Hunter Harvey. All those guys have had their handful of really good moments, and Jordan Weems is now in that group as well. So the Nationals play the Mariners tonight at 9:40 Eastern time. You can catch that pitch in every game of the Nationals and the Mariners this series, as the Nats hometown broadcast is with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Nationals there. And tonight, the Nationals have a relatively decent pitching matchup, but I don't know about this one, guys. I don't know about this one. On the West Coast, not the best coast, it's the worst coast. We're going to preview the Mariners National Series coming up right after this. And now we get into it as the Nationals get ready to take on the Seattle Mariners tonight in the Pacific Northwest. 9:40 first pitch. Can't wait. T-Mobile Park, a beautiful, beautiful sight to be seen in Seattle, Washington. Seattle, by the way, hosting the All-Star game. Get a nice little look of T-Mobile Park. See who's going to be in the home run derbies. We'll start to see some names come out here any moment, anytime soon. Probably not any Nationals in it. More than likely, definitely not any Nationals in it. But still, you see the point. We get a little preview of that All-Star game in T-Mobile Park. Beautiful stadium, by the way. I'll say it again. Beautiful stadium. Trevor Williams is on the mound tonight against the Mariners ace, Luis Castillo. Luis Castillo was one of the big trade pieces at last deadline outside of Juan Soto when he was traded from the Cincinnati Reds over to the Seattle Mariners, getting him a big extension this last offseason. So far this season, he's worked to a tune of a 2.89 ERA and 101 strikeouts. Luis Castillo is no pushover. He is one of the best pitchers in all of baseball, and as we've seen from the Nationals, a lot of batters have faced him a decent amount, and not a lot of Nationals have had success. Luis Garcia has faced him 6 times, and he's got a 167 batting average, only 1 hit, 1 RBI as well. Corey Dickerson has faced him the most of any Nationals hitter, and he's been relatively decent. 250 batting average, no RBIs in 12 at-bats. Listen, Luis Castillo tonight, he's going to be good. This guy is not a bad pitcher whatsoever. Luis Castillo is going to be on, and this Nationals offense will have to come in clutch because the Mariners offense, they don't come at you too easy. Now, while some batters have struggled just a little bit against Trevor Williams, we'll talk about that in a little bit later, but Luis Castillo is no pushover for this Nationals team. And when talking about this Mariners series, you're going to be starting with talking about that guy with Luis Castillo. But as I said, Trevor Williams has faced a few of those guys, and Colton Wong, second baseman, you know the name, that is the guy that you got to watch out for going up against Trevor Williams. He's got a 350 plus batting average against Trevor Williams alone in over 10 plus at-bats. That's not great. We saw him from the NL Central. Colton Wong, longtime Cardinal. We saw him in the playoffs many, many times. Trevor Williams played for the Pirates growing up. That is where they met a lot. Colton Wong has his number, that left-handed bat. That is going to be a tough matchup if he is indeed in the lineup tonight, which obviously has not come out yet because it is a Monday morning and it's on the West Coast, which, by the way, hate West Coast games now. Now I get it. But even then, that's not the only game this series as the Nationals get ready to take on. Well, not take on. They're having Jake Irvin out there against one of my kind of sleeper arms, Brian Wu, a 6th-round pick back in 2021 for the Mariners. Kind of worked his way up here pretty quickly. 4 starts this season, only 17 innings pitched, but he's got 25 strikeouts. This guy, while his ERA is at a 5.09, don't get yourself fooled here. This guy is a big league pitcher, and he is a very good pitcher, in fact, for tomorrow's ball game. So the Nationals, they got their hands full with some relatively good pitching matchups this series, but the Nationals have Jake Irvin going on the mound as well. He has his ERA down to a 4.7 after a great start in his last outing, but his last 7 starts, he's got a 6.03 ERA in the major leagues. Not ideal, not what you want to see, but still, Jake Irvin hopefully can carry the good juju over. The 26-year-old needs it. He needs this game tonight. He needs to get the win. And most importantly, not tonight, tomorrow, he needs to get a win more so than anything else. Because Jake Irvin, if he's going to keep his starting role in his starting rotation spot, you're going to need to start seeing better results than what we have seen over the last month and a half or so. So, of course, you guys can catch the Nationals play the Mariners tonight at 9:40 Eastern time, as they do each and every day. Catch every pitch of the Nats hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Nationals there. And thank you guys for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every day. If you haven't already, check myself out over on Twitter at RyanClary11. You can follow the show page as well at LO_Nationals. I'll keep up the game there. We'll talk about it. We'll tweet it out some things because I have some thoughts during these games. So make sure to check that out and much, much more. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Locked On Nationals over on YouTube. Any subscription, anything is much appreciated. Share with some friends. Share with whatever you talk with. I'll catch you guys on the flip side. Have a good one. Go Nationals on the West Coast. Seattle baseball. Let's do it.